The recipe today is called Mrs Stockdel's Excellent Small Cakes, which are much esteemed at court. The king himself have eat of them, which is a very long title. The person who wrote this book was called George Hartman. Since this book was published in 1682, we think that the king who ate these biscuits or cakes was Charles II. As you'll see from the really long title, it is actually a book of two parts. There's one part which is for medicine and one part which is for cookery. This is because during the early modern period and medieval period, women of the house were in charge of both medicine and cooking. George Hartman was a collector of recipes, and these recipes came from men, from different countries, but they also came from women. We will be following Mrs Stockdel's recipe today. So, as you can see from the recipe, there isn't many instructions. Our jobs as historic kitchens interpreters is to experiment and to see what's the best way to do a recipe. I've tried multiple different ways and have found that the best way to do this recipe is to start with creaming your sugar and butter. To make 15, you need 340 grams of flour. You then halve this for the butter, the sugar, the currants. In the recipe, it calls for 7 eggs, but I only need to use 1 full egg and 1 egg yolk. There we go. In medieval times and early modern times, rose water was like vanilla, so you'd have it in everything and it would taste delicious. I've measured out half a teaspoon, but if you like rose water, add more, and if you don't, you could always put vanilla in. We're just going to mix this together now, only a tiny bit. So I'm next going to be putting in flour and nutmeg. The recipe says it's excellent small cakes, but I found it's more like excellent small biscuits. But cake was a term that was used for many different things in the past, rather than just the cakes that we know today. So you can have a cake which is a biscuit. So I've just put a bit of my flour in to begin with, because otherwise it would get really claggy when you mix it together. You can buy nutmeg already ground up in the shops. In the past, and as of now, you get nutmeg just like that. And you don't need too much for this. It has a lovely smell. It makes me think of Christmas. So I'm just going to do 1/4 teaspoon. In the recipe, it actually calls for a whole nutmeg, but I wouldn't advise putting that in your mixture. Mix it in. And it will slowly form into a dough, but before we do this, I just need to pop in the currants. And now we just have to wait and mix and mix and mix until we form a dough. It's now formed into a ball of dough, and I'm going to start kneading it on here for 10 minutes. In the recipe, it says you need to make cakes which are the size of your hand. So the way that I would like to do it, or I find is the best way to do it, is to roll it flat and then to get a cookie cutter. And luckily, I have one the size of my hand. From my experimenting, I figured out that 5mm works very well for these cakes. On the recipe, it says put the cakes on tin by the fire, but I'm going to pop them on a baking tray and put it in the oven, which is the modern equivalent. So you just cut them like normal. You want to have a bit of space on the tray. It's not that they'll get too big or expand out, you just don't want them to touch. This recipe is very similar to an Easter biscuit recipe because of the nutmeg and the currants. And I think that's what's great about history and recipes from the past. We're still so in touch with them. You know what they are, you know the ingredients, and you know what it should kind of look like. The recipe doesn't say how long to bake it on the tin for, but I've done some testing, and for this side of a cake, you want to put it in the oven for 10 to 12 minutes on 200 degrees Celsius. Off they go. Great, they're all done. And you can tell they're done because they've got a nice golden colour on them. So in the recipe, it doesn't tell you what to do after this, so I assume you just eat them. But I found that the best thing to do is to leave them on the tin for about 5 to 10 minutes, just to cool down a bit more and for the base to cook. And to fully cool them down, you can then transfer them onto a wire rack like you would normally do. And there you have it, Mrs Stockdel's excellent small cakes, which are much esteemed at court. The king himself have eat of them, or biscuits if you'd prefer. I've had so much fun experimenting with these. It's something so simple, something that you can do at home, and I think Mrs Stockdel would like them, perhaps, or the king might eat them. I don't know, but I'll have one now anyway. Guys, do you want to come in and try one?
On our way.
A biscuit or small cake for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm also going to have one.
These look great. Got a lovely
They look
colour on them.
fantastic, yeah.
Gonna do my best Paul Hollywood.
It doesn't snap like an English biscuit, does it? It's more like an American cookie.
You know what I'm getting is a nutmeg. It's really nice, it's not too much. And I actually think the currants are, because sometimes, you know, when you have raisins in something, they feel just really big, but the currants are actually the perfect size for the thickness of biscuit cake that you've got.
But this is really, really nice.
Thanks for tasting them, guys. I think we've done Mrs Stockdel proud.
I'm just gonna take these with me. So, thank you for making these, bye.
Thanks.